In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful, responsive, cross-platform Twitter app from scratch and get it running and working on 5 different platforms. So we're going to create an iOS app that you see here. We're going to create an Android app. We're going to create a Mac version of our app, a Windows version, and we're going to get this running in a web browser as well as a responsive single-page application using Vue.js, Quasar Framework, and Firebase. This course requires a basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and knowledge of Vue.js would be beneficial. And before we get started, I just want to give a huge shout out to freeCodeCamp for hosting this video. My name's Danny, I'm an indie app developer and creator of a popular cross-platform app called Fudgit, and I teach Vue.js, web development and cross-platform app development on my YouTube channel, which you can find at dannys.link/YouTube, and the link will be in the description. So what we're going to do here is create this simple, beautiful and responsive Twitter clone using Vue.js, Quasar and Firebase. And it's going to have a simple Twitter style layout with a drawer on the left hand side, and this drawer can be toggled with this button. And we have links to our 2 pages, the about page, which is just a simple content page, and then the home page. And we can enter a tweet here with a 280 character limit. So if we try and type beyond that, then it will stop us. So we can enter a tweet, and when we click this button, it'll be added to the top of our feed here. And we can also delete our tweets and they'll disappear with this nice animation. And we can like our tweets as well by clicking this button. And it's going to be responsive and have a different layout for mobile. You can see the drawer disappears and can be toggled again with this button. And we're going to be using a Firebase Cloud Firestore database to store all of our tweet data. And once we've got this running and working in the web browser, we're going to generate hybrid apps which can be deployed to all of the different app stores for iOS, Android, Mac and Windows. And thanks to the Firebase Cloud Firestore database, it's going to have live data sync across all of our devices. So if I add a tweet here on the web browser version and we look over here on the iOS version, we can see that new tweet pop up on the iOS version as well. And likewise, if I delete a tweet on the iOS version, we see that tweet instantly deleted on the web version as well. So how is it possible to create this app for all of these different platforms? Well, it's made possible by Quasar Framework. So what the flip is Quasar Framework? Well, it's an incredible new framework which allows you to create a Vue.js app with a single code base and deploy it to many different platforms. So we can deploy it to the web as a single page application, a progressive web app, or a server-side rendered app. We can deploy it to a hybrid mobile app, which can be deployed to the different app stores using Cordova for both iOS and Android. And we can deploy it to a desktop app using Electron for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And it also has a huge material design component library with hundreds of different components such as buttons, and lists, and tables, and tons of different form components. And you can just click on this button for any component and grab the code and just paste it into your app and start using it. And it also has tons of different utilities and plugins, such as inbuilt date formatting, the ability to store and retrieve data using local storage, and also dialog, loading and notification plugins, which make it really easy to create dialogues and notifications and stuff like that. It also has hot reloading on all devices, so when you change your work, you see the change instantly, even when you're developing mobile and desktop apps. And it also has platform detection built in, which means that you can, for example, display a particular element or component only on desktop and then display a different element only on mobile. Or you can fire a particular block of JavaScript code only on mobile and then a different block of JavaScript on desktop. So Quasar is one of the most versatile frameworks out there at the moment, especially if your goal is to create an app on multiple platforms. Let's get started by creating a new Quasar project using the Quasar CLI. So you want to go to the Quasar site at quasar.dev and then get started. I'm just going to stretch this out a bit. And you want to go to Quasar CLI and install Quasar CLI. And you need to have Node installed. So you can get that at nodejs.org. And you might want the one on the left here. Once that's installed, you can then install the Quasar CLI with this command. So I'm just going to copy that and jump to my terminal, which is just running within VS Code, which is the editor I'm going to be using. And you just want to run npm install-g at quasar/CLI. And if you have any trouble installing that, then you might need to add sudo at the start. And I already have this installed, so I'm not going to install it. But once the Quasar CLI is installed, we can then create a new Quasar project with the Quasar create command. So I'm just going to jump back to my terminal in VS Code. So you want to make sure you're in the folder where you keep all your projects and then just run Quasar create. And you want to give it a name. I'm going to call it Quitter. And it's going to ask us for some options here. I'm going to leave the default project name. I'm going to change the product name to Quitter. I'm going to leave the description and I'll just enter my name as the author. And I'm going to choose Sass with indented syntax for the CSS preprocessor. And it's asking us for our components and directives import strategy. And I'm going to choose auto import because this means that whenever we use a new Quasar component in our app, it will be imported automatically, which makes our life a lot easier. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to disable ESLint, although you might want to consider using that in your own projects, especially if you're working in teams. And I'm not going to enable any other options, so I'm just going to hit enter here. And I'm going to choose yes, use npm to install the dependencies. Okay, it's finished creating our project. And if we scroll up a bit, it tells us how to launch it. We just need to cd into the folder and run Quasar dev. And I can see the folder it's created here, Quitter. So I'm just going to drag that into VS Code. Then open up the terminal and just run Quasar dev. And we can now see our basic Quasar starter app running in the browser. And so by default, we just have a simple app with a simple layout. We have a drawer along the side, which can be toggled with this button. We have a header along the top, and we just have a simple page with this image. And we have some basic responsiveness out of the box. So if I scale this down, you can see the left drawer disappears and again can be toggled with this button. Let's take a quick look at the folder structure of this Quasar project. So in the root of our project, we have this quasar.conf.js file. And this is the configuration file for our project. And this allows us to do things like install icon libraries and set the view router history mode to hash or history. And we can also install animations here and plugins, and also configure our different modes such as SSR, PWA, Electron, Cordova, etc. And the main folder we're concerned with is this source folder. So in the root of that, we have this index.template.html. So this is our HTML page, and we don't typically need to change this much. And it just has this one div in the body. And this is where our main view component will be loaded, which is this app.view file. So this is our root view component, and this will load the layout component of our app here, which brings me to the layouts folder. So this is where the layout of our app can be found, this main layout.view file. And the layout is basically all of the elements that surround the pages of our app. So in this case, this is the drawer along the side and the header along the top. And within our layout, we load our pages. And right now we just have this one page with this image in the middle. And if I scroll down to this QPageContainer component, we have this router view component here, and that's where our pages will be loaded, which brings me to the pages folder. So we'll place all of our pages in here. And right now we just have an error page and this index.view page, which is this page here with just this one image on it. And we also have this public folder where we can place images and CSS files and things like that. And when we build our app, anything in this folder will be available at the root. So for example, this favicon will be available at /favicon.ico. And then back to our source folder, we also have an assets folder where we can also place images and stuff like that. However, everything in this folder will be processed by Webpack. So you might find that images are converted to base64 and stuff like that. Then we have this boot folder where we place boot files. And a boot file basically allows us to initialize a plugin or a package before our app starts up. And we will be adding a boot file later on for Firebase. Then we have a components folder where we can place all of our Vue components, and a CSS folder where we have a global CSS file or Sass file. And we also have this quasar.variables.sass file as well, which we can use to customize the colors of our theme. And we will change our theme a little bit later on. And finally, we have a router folder where we configure our router. And if we open up this routes.js, we can see this routes array where we're configuring all of our routes. So you can see it loads our layout file at the root, and we configure all of our pages within this children array. And right now we just have one path to our index.vue file, which is this page that we see here with just this one image on it. Let's work on the layout of our app. And if we look at the Twitter site, it has this 2-draw kind of layout with one on the left and one on the right, and all of our tweets and stuff in the middle. And Quasar has a layout builder that we can use to generate a layout. So let's see if we can use that to generate a layout that's similar to the Twitter site. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and then layout and grid, and then layout builder, and it opens up this layout builder for us. And we basically just have to choose all of the options we want. So we do want a queue header, so we're going to leave that enabled. We don't need a footer, so I'll disable that. We want a left side draw, and we want a right side draw, and we don't need these navigation tabs, so I'll disable this option. Then I'll click on continue. And if we look at the Twitter site, the header doesn't go all the way along the top. It's just at the top of this middle content column. So if I jump back to layout builder, we can play around with these options here to generate a similar layout. So these options on the left are related to the left draw, and the options on the right for the right draw. So if I click on this L option here, we can see that the left draw now goes all the way up to the top, just like the Twitter site. And if we choose this little R option on the right, we see the right draw do the same thing. So this is the kind of layout we want, with our header just at the top of the middle column. And I don't really like this drop shadow on the header. So under this header bit, I'm going to change this separator type to bordered. So we just have a bordered header. Then I'm just going to scroll down and click on continue. I'm just going to disable this visible footer option because we're not going to have a footer. Then we can just click on export layout, and it gives us an entire layout file. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to jump to our layout file, which is in source, layouts, and main layout.vue. I'm just going to select everything here and paste over our new layout. And if we hit save, we can see our app now has the kind of layout that we're looking for. Let's make our header look a bit more like the Twitter header. And the first thing I'm going to do is change our primary color to the Twitter blue color. And our current primary color is this blue color we see in the background of the header here. So I'm going to jump to source, CSS, and quasar.variables.sass. And we can use this file to customize our theme colors. And we can see our primary color here. So I'm going to paste in the Twitter color, which I have in my clipboard, which is just 1DA1F2, and I'll save that. And we now see our header changed to the Twitter blue color. Let's work on this header a little bit. So I'm going to jump back to main layout.vue, and we can see our header here. It's this Q header component. And I'm going to remove this Quasar image, which is this Q avatar component. So I'll get rid of that. And I'm going to change this title, which is in this Q toolbar title component, to Quitter. Save that. And I don't want this right-hand sidebar to be toggleable. So I'm going to remove this button here, which is this Q button component here. So I'll get rid of that and save that. And I want this header to have a white background with black text, like the Twitter header. And if we jump to the Quasar site and then style and identity and then color palette, then we have all of these different colors that we can use in our app. And so if we want to set our text or our foreground to a particular color, then we can just use a class such as text dash and then the name of the color up here. Or if we want to set a background color, we can just use a class such as bg dash and then the name of the color. And we see all of these different colors, and we don't see them here, but we also have equivalent classes for black and white as well. And if we look at our Q header component here, this currently has a class of bg dash primary, which is giving this header a background color of our primary color, which we set in our theme file before, and a class of text dash white, which is giving it this white text color. So I'm going to change this background class to bg-white to give it a white background color. And I'll change this other class to text-black to give the text a black color. And I also want to make this title bold because it's bold in the Twitter header. And if we jump to the Quasar site and then style and identity and typography, then we have all of these different classes we can use to style our text. And if we want to make our text bold, we can use this text-weight-bold class. So I'm going to jump to this Q toolbar title component, which has our title. I'll add a class of text-weight-bold and save that. And our heading is now bold. So this header is now looking pretty similar to the Twitter header. Let's make this left drawer look like the Twitter left drawer with a nice logo at the top and then links to all of our pages. So let's add a logo to the top first, and there's an icon component that we can use for that. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and then View Components and Icon. And so we can use this icon component. So I'm just going to click on View Source and grab the first one. And we'll add it to this left drawer. And this is our left drawer here, this Q draw component. So I'll get rid of this comment and just paste in that icon, save that. And we can now see that icon on the page. And if I jump back to this icon page on Quasar, we can use all of these different icon libraries, material icons, font awesome, ionicons, and all of the rest. And we can use the material icons out of the box. So if I click on this link, it takes us to the material icons page. And so we can use any of these icons. And all we need to do is replace this name prop with the icon name that we see here. So if we want to use this accessibility icon, we can just change this name prop to accessibility and save that. And we can see the icon update. So we can use all of the material icons out of the box, but the other icon libraries need to be enabled in our config file. And I want to use font awesome for our logo. So I'm going to jump to our config file. And this is just in the root of our project. It's this quasar.conf.js. And I'm just going to search for icons. And we can see in this extras array here, all of these different icon libraries. So to add the font awesome icon library, we just need to uncomment this line and save it. And we can now use the font awesome icons as well. So I'm going to jump to the font awesome page and I'm going to search for bird and scroll down. And this dove icon looks pretty good. So I'm going to click on that. And if we look at this example markup here, these classes that we see here are what we need to use in this name prop. So I'm just going to copy this, jump back to our app, and I'm just going to paste in that markup I just copied underneath this icon. Then I'm going to copy these two classes and paste them into this name prop, and then just get rid of this I tag and save that. And we can now see our dove icon on the page. However, I want this icon to be much bigger and I want it to be our primary blue color as well. And if we jump back to the icon page on Quasar and we jump down to this QIcon API, all of the components in Quasar have this API section, which tells us which props, slots, and events we can add to each component. So if I jump to style, then we have this size prop, and we can set this to a pixel value or a rem value, or a generic name such as XS for extra small or MD for medium. So let's use this size prop on our icon. I'm going to split the attributes on this icon by using the split HTML attributes extension, which you can get from the extensions page in VS Code. And I'm going to add this size prop and I'm going to set it to LG for large. And if I save that, our icon is now nice and large. And I also want it to be our primary color. So I'll jump back to the API section here and we have this color prop and we can just set it to any of the colors which I showed you before on the color palette page. And we want to set it to our primary color. So I'm going to add this color prop and just set that to primary and save that. And the icon now has our primary color. Okay, let's add some padding around this icon because it's currently squished up into the corner. And if we go to the Quasar site, and style and identity and spacing, then we have these really handy classes that we can use to add padding and margin to our elements. And we have some examples down below. So if we wanted to add a small amount of padding in all directions, we could just add Q-P for padding, A for all directions, -SM for small. Or if we just wanted to add padding on the left, we could add Q-PL for padding left, and then -SM or -LG. So I'm just going to add a medium amount of padding around this icon. So our icon is here, so I'll add a class of Q-P for padding, A for all directions, -MD for medium, and I'll save that, and that's looking a lot better. And we also have equivalent classes for margin. So if we wanted to add margin all around, we would just change this P to an M. But I'm going to leave this as padding. Okay, let's add some navigation items. So I'm going to jump back to the Quasar site, view components, and list items. And I'm going to scroll down a bit. And I want our navigation items to look something like this top item here with an icon on the left and some text, because this is what the navigation links on Twitter kind of look like. So I'm going to click on view source here, and I'm just going to copy all of this QList component. I'm going to paste it under our icon here and just fix the indentation, and I'll save that. And we now see this list on the page. So each of these list items is in a Q item component, and I'm only interested in this top one here, this one here. So I'm just going to remove all of the other Q item components and also all of these Q separators as well. So I'll get rid of all of those and save that, and we now just have this one item. And this list currently has a border around it, and that's being added by this bordered prop on the Q list. So I'll get rid of that prop, save that, and we see the border disappear. And I'm going to change the label on this item to home, because we're going to make this a link to our home page. So I'll change this text here, icon as avatar, to home, save that. And I want to change this icon to a little house icon or something. So I'm going to jump to the material icons page we opened before, search for home, and this icon looks pretty good. So we just need to use the class home. And if we look inside this Q item here, we have this Q icon with the name set to Bluetooth. So I'm just going to change that to home and save that. And this is looking pretty good. I just want to increase the size of this icon a little bit. So again, I'll add a size prop. Let's try setting this to medium, so MD. Save that, and that looks pretty good. And I also want to make this text here big and bold, just like the navigation items on the Twitter site. So I'm going to jump back to the typography page in style and identity and typography. Let's try this H6 class. So we just need to add a class of text-H6 to use this style. So we'll add that to this Q item section here where our text is. So we'll just add class text-H6, and I'll save that, and that's looking pretty good. And I also want it to be a bit bolder, so we can just use the class we used before, text-weight-bold, save that, and this is looking pretty nice now, pretty similar to the Twitter navigation items. So I want this to link to our home page, so I'm going to jump back to the list and list items component page and jump down to the Q item API. And in this behavior section, we can add this toProp to give our item a link. So I'm going to add that to this Q item here. I'm going to split the attributes again and add this toProp. And I'm just going to set this to /, which is the root of our app, the home page. So I'll save that. And this should now link to our home page. And the text has changed to blue because this is now currently the active link because we're on the home page. So let's duplicate this Q item and create a link for our about page, which we're going to create later on. So I'm just going to duplicate this Q item and I'll set the path to /about, and I'll change the text here to about and save that. And I want to use a different icon here. So I'll jump to the material icons page. Let's just search for help. And we can just use this icon here. So we just need to use the name help. So this Q icon here, I'm going to change the name to help and save that. And that's looking pretty decent. And now that these Q items are links because of this toProp, we should now be able to remove this color prop from our icons, and they should be colored automatically because I'd like the icon to be black when it's not currently the active link, just like the text is black when it's not the current active link. So I'm going to remove both of these color props from both of these queue icons and save that. And this inactive icon now changes to black. And later on, when we create the About page and we jump to the About page, we should see this icon and this text change to blue, and this home icon and text change to black. And finally, let's make this drawer a little bit less wide because it's quite a bit wider than the left drawer on the Twitter site. And if we jump to the Quasar site and layout and grid and layout drawer and jump down to the drawer API and then jump to style, then we have this width prop that we can use to set the width of the drawer. So let's add this to our drawer. I'm just going to split the attributes on this queue drawer and add this width prop. And this is expecting a number, not a string. So I'm going to bind to this width prop by adding a colon at the start. And I'm going to set this to 283. And I'll save that. And our drawer is now a little bit narrower. Let's put some stuff in this right drawer now because it's looking a little bit sad. So if we look at the Twitter site, over on the right here, we have a search bar and then a kind of a news feed. So let's add a search bar first. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and view components and form components and input text field. And I'm going to scroll down. And I'd like something like this with an icon over on the left, although we're going to use a search icon. So I'm going to click on View Source and just grab this first queue input component, copy that, and we'll paste it to the top of our right drawer. And the right drawer is here, this queue drawer component. So I'll paste that queue input there and save that. And I'm going to add a bit of margin around this. So I'm going to split the attributes on this queue input. And I'll remove this vModel because we're not going to connect this to anything. And I'll add a class of Q-MA for margin all, -MD for medium. We now have a little bit of margin around it. And I would like this to be rounded and outlined instead of square and filled. And if we jump back to the Quasar site and jump down to the API section and style, scroll down a bit. So we have an outline prop we can use for an outline design and a rounded prop we can use to give our input a bit of border radius. So I'm going to replace these filled and square props with outlined and rounded. Save that. And that's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a placeholder to this, which just says search quitter. Save that. And I'd like this to be a little bit smaller. And if we jump back to the API, then we have this dense prop, which we can use, which makes certain components a little bit smaller. So I'll add this dense prop as well. And it's now a little bit smaller. And we need to replace this icon. The icon is here. So I'll change this name to search, which is a material icon we can use. And this is looking pretty good now. So let's add a little news feed here. So I'll jump back to the Quasar site and list items. And I'll scroll down and look for something that looks like a news feed. So this looks pretty good, this top item here. So I'm going to click on View Source. And I'll just copy this first queue item and this opening queue list tag. And we'll paste that under our input. Fix the indentation. We need to add the closing queue list tag. So I'll add that down here. Save that. And I don't want this border on the list. So let's remove this bordered prop. Let's change the text of these headings here. This first line could be like a category, such as politics. So I'll change the text in there to, let's say, education. And this second item, I'll just put some text in there. Something amazing happened. Save that. And I'd like this education text to be kind of a gray color, like we see here. So I'll add a class to this education label of text-gray, which is one of those colors you can find on the color palette page we looked at before. Save that. And I want this second heading to be bold. So I'll add a class to that as well of text-weight-bold. Same one we used before. Okay, this is looking pretty good. So I'll duplicate this queue item a couple of times. So we have a few items. Save that. And I'd like to have a little line between each item. And if we jump back to the list and list items page and down to the queue list API, and style. No, it's in content actually. We have this separator prop we can use to add a separator between each item. So we want to add that to the QList component. So I'll add that here. Separator, save that. And we now see a little line between each item. And I'd like to have a little bit more padding within each of these Q items. So I'm going to select each of these Q items, do a multiple selection, and add a class to each one of Q-PA for padding all, -MD for medium. And we now have a little bit more space within each of these items. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this layout for now. Let's see how it looks on mobile. I'll scale this down. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. However, on the Twitter mobile app, we actually see the Twitter logo here at the top in the middle, instead of some text here. So let's do the same thing on our app. So on desktop, we'll see some text here. And on mobile, we'll hide the text and display our logo at the top instead. Okay, let's make this title here in our header only appear on larger displays. And Quasar has some responsive classes that we can use to show or hide different elements on different screen sizes. So I'll jump to the Quasar site and style and identity and visibility. And I'll scroll down to window width related. So in Quasar, we have 5 different breakpoints: XS, SM, MD, LG, and XL. And it tells you the width thresholds of these breakpoints here. And you can override these default thresholds. And it tells you how to do that on this SAS SCSS variables page. But anyway, we have some classes that we can use with these breakpoints. So if we want something to only display on extra small windows, then we can just add this XS class to the element, and the same for all the other breakpoints. And if we scroll down a little bit, it says here, you can also show some DOM element or component if it's lower than one of these sizes. Same for greater than one of these sizes. Just attach LT- or GT- prefixes. So if we use a class such as LT-MD to an element, then that element will only be displayed on windows which are smaller than the medium breakpoint. So only on XS and SM screen sizes. So I'm going to jump back to our app. Let's find this title that's in our header. So our Q header is here, and here's our title. So I'm going to wrap this text in a span, and I'll add a class of GT-SM because I only want this text to appear if the window is greater than the small breakpoint. So in other words, only show this text on medium, large, and extra large displays. So I'll save that. And if we scale down our browser, then we see that text disappear. Scale it back up, and it reappears again. Okay, so let's add our logo up here, but only on mobile devices. So I'm going to grab the icon that's already in our left drawer up here. And that icon is here, so I'll copy that and I'll paste it after this span, indent that, and I'll add a visibility class here. So we only want to show this on screen sizes that are less than medium. So I'm going to add LT-MD and save that. And if we scale this down, yeah, we can see that logo appear, scale it back up, and it disappears again. So I'll just scale this back down again. And I want this to be a little bit smaller up here. So this size prop, I'm going to set that to SM for small. And I also want this to be in the center of the header. And Quasar does have some positioning classes that we can use. Let's stretch this out a bit. If we go to style and identity and positioning, so we have classes such as this absolute center class, which we could use. So I'll just add that to this icon, absolute-center, save that. And this looks great here. However, for devices such as the iPhone 10, 11, and 12, the header is actually a lot taller than this because it adds extra space for the notches on those devices. And if we use this class, it will also put this icon in the vertical center as well. So it ends up being up in the middle of the header somewhere up here. So instead of using this class, I'm going to add a custom class to this icon. We could call it header-icon. And we'll just add some custom CSS to put this in the center. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom of this file. And add a style section with the lang set to Sass, and we'll target this header icon class. And we're going to set the position to absolute. I'm going to set the bottom to 0 to put it right at the bottom. Then I'm going to set the left to 50%. And then to pull it back into the center, I'm going to use transform. And I'm going to set translate X to minus 50% and save that. And the icon is now in the middle. So we now have a different header for mobile and desktop. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this layout now. So we're almost ready to start working on our pages. But before we do that, let's set up some pages and routes. Let's set up some pages and routes for our home and about pages. Because right now, if we look at our two items in our left drawer here, this home item is linking to the path slash, which is working. But this about item is linking to the path slash about, and we haven't set up a route for that yet. So if we click on about, we just get this error page, which by the way is just this error 404.vue file in the pages folder. And this isn't much fun. And first of all, I'm just going to open up this page we see here, which is in source pages index.vue. And I'm going to remove these flex classes here because I don't want everything to be in the center on this page. And then I'm just going to remove this image as well. And for now, I'm just going to put H5 in here, which says home. And I'll change the name of this component as well to page home to make it a bit more clear what this is. And I'll save that. And I'll also rename this page. So I'll change it from index.vue to page home.vue to make it a bit more clear what it is. And this now breaks our app, because if we go to our routes file in source router routes.js, we can see our route here, and it's currently looking for a component called index.vue. So we need to change this to page home.vue because we just renamed it. Save that. And that's now working again. And let's duplicate this route and set up a route for our about page. So the path is going to be /about. And let's point this to a page called pageabout.vue. So I'll change this to pageabout.vue and save that. And this breaks our app again because this page doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to duplicate pagehome.vue. And if you don't see this option here, this duplicate file or directory option, this is being added by the duplicate action extension, which you can find in the extension store. And I'm going to duplicate this and call it pageabout.vue. And I'll open that up and change the text in here to about. And I'll change the component name to page about and save that. Let's see if this is working. Yep, we can now navigate between both of our pages. However, we have a little issue with our active classes on these navigation items here. When we're on the home page, the home link is active, which is okay. But if we jump to the about page, the about link becomes active, but the home link stays active as well. And we can fix this. If we go to the Quasar site, view components, list and list items, and jump down to the queue item API, then we have this exact prop, which we can add to our queue items, which is an equivalent to Vue router's exact property, which means that the active classes will only be added to these links when we're on the exact route that they refer to. So I'll jump to main layout.vue and add this exact prop to both of these queue items. And I'll save that. And this seems to be fixed now. Okay, our pages are set up. However, on the Twitter site, if we look at the header, it doesn't actually display Twitter up here. It displays the name of the current page. So if we're on the home page, it says home. And if we're on the notifications page, it says notifications. So let's do the same thing here instead of displaying Twitter. And what we can do is we can jump to our routes file. And in fact, I'm just going to split this up onto multiple lines so it doesn't get too messy. And what we can do is add a name property to each of these, like this. And we can set the homepage route to home. And the about page root, we can set this name property to about. And I'll save that. And we can now access these properties anywhere within our app by using the $root object. So if we now jump to main layout.view and our header, which is here, and here's where we're spitting out that quitter text. What we can do is replace this with double curly braces and then $root and then .name. So I'll save that, and we now see home in the header. And if we jump to the about page, we see about. Okay, so we're ready to start working on our pages now. Let's work on the about page first, because this is going to be nice and easy. Okay, let's set up our about page. So we want to go to source, pages, and page about.view. I'm just going to add a heading and some text. So I'm going to get rid of this H5, and I'm going to add a H4 with the text about quitter. And then I'm just going to add a paragraph with some lorem ipsum, and I'll duplicate that paragraph so we've got two. And we could do with some padding on this page. So we can use the same classes we used before. So I'll add a class to the QPage component and set this to q-pa-lg. So we have a large padding on this page. And I'm going to remove the top margin from this heading because we have quite a lot of space up here. So this H4, I'll add a class of q-mt for margin top -none for 0 margin. And I'll also reduce the bottom margin a little bit. So I'll add a class of q-mb for margin bottom -md for medium. And I also want this heading to be bold. So I'll add a class of text -weight -bold. Save that. And I'd like this paragraph text to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and style and identity and typography. And this text body1 class should do the job. So I'll copy that class. And I'll surround these paragraphs in a div with that class. And I'll just move those in there and save that. Okay, this is looking pretty good. We're now ready to start working on our homepage and start adding the real guts of our app. Let's start working on our homepage. So we need some kind of input at the top here where we can add a tweet. And if we look at the Twitter site, we have an input here with a placeholder that says what's happening. We have an avatar over on the left, and we have a character counter thing which stops us typing too many characters. And we have a submit button here as well. So let's see if we can find something similar on the Quasar site. So I'm going to go to View Components, Form Components, and Input Text Field. And I'm going to scroll down and see if I can find something nice. So this is kind of what we want. This input has an avatar on the left. It has a character counter here which stops us typing too many characters. And it has a submit button over on the right here. So this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th one down. So I'll click on View Source and grab the 10th one down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'll grab this Q input here, copy that, and paste it to the top of our home page, which is in Source, Pages, Page Home.view. And I'll just paste it over this H5, fix the indentation, and save that. We could do with a bit of space around this. So I'm going to surround this Q input in a div, and I'll add some padding classes to this. And we can actually specify vertical padding and horizontal padding independently. So I'd like quite a lot of vertical padding and a little bit less horizontal padding. And so to add vertical padding, we can just add Q-P for padding, and then Y for padding on the Y axis, then a dash, and then I'll add LG for large. Save that. And we need to put this Q input inside that div. So I'll just move that up, save that. And then to add some padding on the X axis, I'll add Q-PX for padding on the X axis, -MD for a medium padding. Save that. Let's customize this input a little bit. I'm going to split the attributes on this Q input. I'm going to remove this dense prop, and I'll set this label to what's happening, like on the Twitter site. And if we use this label prop, then when we click into the field, we see the label pop up to the top there. but I prefer using a placeholder where the text just disappears when you click into the field. So I'll change this label to a placeholder, save that, and that text now disappears. We want the maximum length of this field to be 280 characters and not 12. So I'll set this max length to 280 and save that. We can see that update there. Let's see if that's working. I'll just paste loads of text in there. And that doesn't seem to be working. And that's because we need to bind this to a data property. So this V model here, I'll change this to new Queet content, and I'll set up a data property for that. So in our script section, I'll add our data method that returns an object, and add this property new Queet content, and I'll just set it to an empty string and save that. Let's see if this character counter is working now. Yeah, we can see the characters counting up, and when we get to 280, it stops us from typing anymore. And I'll remove this clear button and this clock button, which is in this template tag here. So I'll get rid of that, and I'll get rid of this field hint slot as well. Save that, and I'm going to replace this avatar image with my image, and that's this image tag here. And I have the link in my clipboard, but you can use your own avatar if you want. I'll save that, and I want to increase the size of this avatar. And this Q avatar component, like the Q icon component, has a size prop that we can use. So I'll set the size to XL for extra large. And I'm going to replace this submit button here with a text style button like this one here. So I'll jump to the Quasar site, view components, buttons, button, scroll down, and I'd like something like this, a rounded solid button. And this is on the 4th line, so I'll click on view source. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think it's this one here with the rounded prop. So I'll copy that and paste it over this send button here and save that. Let's customize this button. I'm going to split the attributes on that and change the label to Queet. Save that. And I don't want the text on this button to be capitalized. And if we jump back to the button page and the API section and style, maybe I'll scroll down. No, it's not in there. Maybe general, maybe content. We have this no caps prop that we can use to disable those uppercase characters. So I'll add that prop to this Q button, no caps. And if we look at the Twitter site, if we have nothing in this field, then this button is disabled. So let's do the same thing with our button. And if we jump back to the button page and behavior, or maybe it's general, no, maybe style, or it could be in state, we have this disable prop that we can use to disable a button. So we'll bind to the disable prop, and we want to disable this button if there's nothing in this new Queet content property. So we can just set this disable prop to not new Queet content and save that. And the button is now disabled, but if we type something, it's now enabled again. Now I want this input to automatically grow vertically as we add more content, because right now it just goes from left to right like that. But if we look at the Twitter site, we can actually add new lines here and the input keeps on growing. So I'm going to jump back to the Quasar site and back to form components and input text field, jump down to the Q input API. And if we jump to the content section and scroll down, we have this auto grow prop, which will make this field grow automatically. So let's add this prop as well, auto grow, save that. And now if we add tons of content in here, it's not working because I added it to the button instead of this input. So I'll cut that auto grow prop and we'll add it to this Q input instead. Save that. Let's try that again. Yep, it's now auto growing and all the content is added to new lines. And I'd like the font size in this input to be quite a bit bigger. I'm actually zoomed out of the Twitter page here, but if I set the zoom to normal, then you can see the text in this field is quite a lot bigger. And unfortunately, there's no size prop or text size prop available for the Q input. So what we'll do is add a class to our Q input and add some custom styles. So I'll add a class to this Q input of new-queet, save that, jump down to the style section, which doesn't exist yet. So we'll add that style with sass, and we'll target this new queet class. And we'll set the font size to the same as it is on the Twitter page, which I think is 19 pixels, and save that. And the text is now nice and big. However, we could do with a bit more line height here, so I'll add a line height property as well and set that to 1.4. That doesn't seem to be working. Let's try adding important. Save that. Just reload the page. And that line height is still not working. I'm just going to inspect this. Let's drag this out a bit. And I'll just drag this down. So our class is being added on this label element here. You can see it there, new queet. But we're trying to style this text area, and the line height we're adding isn't cascading down. So let's make this more specific. Instead of just targeting this new queet class, we'll target the text area within that. So I'll add text area and indent these styles, close the inspector and see if that works. Yeah, it seems to have worked. I'll just reload that. Yeah, we now have a nice amount of line height on this field. So as this input grows down vertically, this queet button stays right up here. And I think it'd be better if it stayed docked down here next to the bottom of this input. And Quasar has a grid system that we can use to have more control over how things are laid out. So if we go to the Quasar site, then layout and grid, then flex grid and introduction to Flexbox, then it tells us all about this grid system that we can use. And if we jump to grid row, so we can set up rows with columns inside. And if I just click on view source, to create a row, we can just use the class row. And then inside that, we can add some divs with a class of col to create columns. So what we could do is put all of this inside a row and then put the input and the avatar in a column inside the row, and then put the button inside another column, because when we use the grid system and these rows and columns, we have more control over the positions of things within the columns. So for example, we can tell everything to force itself down to the bottom of the column. So I'm going to jump to this input, and we already have a div around this input, so we could just make this a row by adding a class of row, and I'll save that. And then inside this row, I'm going to add two columns. So I'll add a div with a class of col, and then another div with a class of col. I'll just break these up. I'm going to select the input and cut that and paste it inside this first column. And then our button, which is currently in this after slot, I'll cut that and get rid of this slot and paste this button in this second column. Just fix the indentation and save that. I'll just reload the page. And currently these columns are 50-50. They're both the same width, because by default columns will just take up an equal amount of space. So if there's two columns, they take up 50% each, or if there are three columns, they take up a third of the available width. But we can add a class to this second column to force it to shrink. So we can just add a class of col-shrink. And all of these classes are explained in this flex grid section on the Quasar site. So I'll save that. And this column is now shrinking. But we still want this button to be pushed down to the bottom of the column. And if we jump back to this grid row page and scroll down to alignment, there's some classes we can use here. So for vertical alignment, we can use this items end class on the row to force the content of the columns down to the bottom of the column. So let's add this items end class to our row. So our row is here. So we'll just add items -end and save that. And this button is now right at the bottom. However, this button is now touching the input and we need a bit of space between these columns. So we need a gutter. So if we jump back to the Quasar site and grid gutter, and if we scroll down, we can use these QColGutter classes to add a gutter between our columns. So we just need to add a class to the row, such as QColGutterSM. So I'll copy this class We'll add it to our row here, and I'll save that. And I'd like a little bit more space than that, so I'll change this to qcolgutter-md for medium, and that's looking pretty good now. And this button is a little bit too low down at the moment. I'd like it to be sort of in line with this line here. So I'm just going to add a bit of bottom margin to that button. So I'll add a class to this button of q-mb for margin bottom dash, let's try md, save that. Maybe a little bit more. I'll change this to lg. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's see if it follows the input down the page. And yeah, it does. So I think that's much better now. And there's one more thing I want to do here. If we look at the Twitter site, after this input section, we have this little divider here with a grey background and a little grey top and bottom border. So let's add something similar under our input. Maybe we could use the Q separator component. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and then view components and separator and scroll down. And by default, this is just a single line, but maybe we can customize it a little bit. So I'm just going to click on view source and grab one of these Q separators. And we'll paste it after our div with the row class. So I'll paste that here and save that. And right now it's just a single line, not quite like the Twitter one. But if we jump to the separator API and style, then we have a size prop we can use to set the thickness of it in pixels or rems. So I'll add a size prop to this Q separator. And I think the one on Twitter is about 10 pixels. So I'll set this to 10 pixels. And that's looking pretty good. However, it's a little bit dark compared to this Twitter one. And if we jump back to the API section, we also have a color prop we can use to set the color. So I'll add that as well. And then I'm going to jump to the color palette page. So style and identity and color palette. Let's look for some grays. Maybe this gray 2 color will work. So I'll set this color prop to gray-2 and save that. We're almost there with this separator, but the one on Twitter has these little top and bottom borders. And I don't think there's a border prop for the Q separator. So what we can do is add a class to this. In fact, I'll split the attributes here, add a class of, let's say, divider. We'll add some custom CSS to add a top and bottom border. So we'll target this divider class, and I'll set the border top to 1 pixel solid and the border bottom to 1 pixel solid. And then we'll set the border color. And if I jump back to the color palette page, maybe we could use a darker color here, because we can actually use these colors in our CSS, because we have CSS variables for all of these colors. So maybe something like gray-5. So what we can do here is set this border color to $, and then gray-5. And I'll save that. And they look a little bit too dark. Let's try gray 4. So I'll change this to gray 4. And yeah, that's looking pretty decent now. Okay, so I think we're done with our new tweet form. Let's move on to our list of tweets. Let's add a list of tweets down here. And tweets have the avatar over on the left. Then they have the user's name and then the handle, and then the date the tweet was posted. And then we have the tweet underneath and some buttons underneath that. So let's see if we can find something we can use on the Quasar site. So I'll go to list and list items, and I'm going to jump down to more involved examples and scroll down a bit. And these email list items look pretty good. We've got the avatar, title at the top, and then a time over on the right. So I'll click on view source, and I'll just copy all of this Q list and paste it after our Q separator. And I'll get rid of all except the first Q item. So I'll get rid of this Q separator and this Q item here and save that. And let's customize this a bit. So I'll split the attributes on the Q list. I'll remove this style property, which is restricting the width. And I'll remove this rounded borders class. And I'll remove this bordered prop as well. And I'll remove this friends label at the top. And I'll replace this avatar with the avatar that's next to our input. So I'll scroll up and grab this Q avatar, copy that, and paste it over this Q avatar, save that. And these lines, props on these labels here are restricting the number of lines that can be displayed. And I don't want this to be restricted, so I'll remove this lines prop from both of these Q item labels. And I'll remove this caption prop, which I think is making the text a bit smaller. And I'll change the text in here, so I'll put my name in here, this first Q item label, and I'll just split this up actually. And I'll save that. And I want this to be bold, so I'll wrap this in a strong tag. And I want to display my handle next to this in gray. So I'll add a span and I'll use one of Quasar's color classes. And I'm going to use text-gray-7 and I'll put my handle in there. Save that. And on the Q item here, this clickable prop and this vripple prop are making this clickable and adding this ripple effect, and I don't want those, so I'll remove these props. And I think we need a bit more vertical padding on these items, so I'll add a class to this Q item of Q-py-md, save that. And I'll replace the text in this second Q item label where our tweet is going to go. So I'll just select everything inside this Q item label and put some lorem ipsum. And we want to make sure this can handle new lines. So I'll stick a new line in here and save that. And we can't see the new lines being added. So what I'm going to do, I'll add a class to this Q item label of queet-content. We'll add some CSS at the bottom. So we'll target the queet content class. And to make sure those new lines are preserved and shown, we can just set the white space property to pre-line, save that. And we can now see those lines. And this avatar is currently vertically centered, but I want it to be always at the top. And if we scroll up here, this Q avatar is inside a Q item section. So let's see if we can find the API for that. And it's down here, Q item section API. So I'll jump to that. And we have this top prop that we can add, which will align content to the top. So we'll add that to this Q item section here, save that. And I want the text to be a little bit bigger, both here at the top and the content text as well. So I'm going to jump to the typography page. So style and identity typography. Maybe we could use this subtitle 1 on the heading of the tweet. So text subtitle 1. So I'll add that to this first Q item label with the username and handle in it. So text-subtitle 1, save that. And I want this body text to be a bit bigger as well. So maybe we could use this body1 style with the class text-body1. So I'll add that class to this second Q item label, text-body1, save that. And this is looking pretty good now. Pretty similar to the way tweets appear on Twitter. And now we just need this action bar at the bottom with some buttons. Let's add these to the bottom of this Q item section underneath our tweet. So after this Q item label, I'll add a row and we'll stick some buttons in here. So I'll jump to the Quasar site, go to View Components, Buttons, Button, and scroll down. And we just want some icon buttons, something like this, a bit like these buttons on Twitter. So I'll grab the code for that, which is this one here. Copy that, paste it into this row, and I'll split the attributes and save that. And I don't want this to be blue, I want it to be gray. So I'm going to change this color prop to gray, save that. And I want it to be a bit smaller, so I'll add a size prop as well, set that to SM for small. And I want to use some Font Awesome icons here, so I'll jump to the Font Awesome page. And I'm going to search for comment, because we'll add a button for comments. And this one looks pretty good, so I'll click on that and copy this example here. And I'll just paste it after this Q button for now. So I'll replace this icon prop here with these classes here. So I'll copy that, paste that in there, and get rid of this, save that. Let's add 3 more buttons. So I'll duplicate this 3 times, And I'm going to use some other Font Awesome buttons, which I found on the Font Awesome page here. So I'm going to use a retweet icon with the classes FAS and then FA-retweet. And then I'm going to use a heart icon with the classes FAR and then FA-heart. And then I'm going to use a delete icon with the classes FAS, FA-trash. Save that. And we can see all of those icons. And I want these icons to spread out. And there's a bunch of flex classes we can use, and they're all on the flex pages on the Quasar site. So I'm going to add a class to this row with our buttons of justify between to add space between all of our items here. And I'll also add a top margin to this button to make a bit of space at the top. So I'll add q-mt-sm, save that. And lastly, I just want to nudge these icons back over to the left a bit, because if you look at the Twitter tweets, this left icon aligns perfectly with the text over on the left. So I'm going to add a class to this row of queet-icons. And then in the style section, we'll target this class, queet-icons, and we'll add a negative left margin. So I'll set margin left to -5 pixels, save that. And this icon is now lined up with this text. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the design of this tweet now. Let's set up some data for our tweets. So I'm going to jump down to the data section, and I'm going to add an array called tweets. And we'll stick each tweet inside an object. So we'll add a content property, and I'll just put some lorem ipsum in there, and we'll add a date property. And I'm just going to use the timestamp format for this. So I'm going to jump to the console in Chrome, just run date.now to get the current date. And I'll copy that and paste that here. And I'll duplicate this object and just change the date. So I'll just run date.now again and copy this date and paste that in there. And I'll save that. And we'll spit these out on the page using a v-for loop. So I'll jump up to this tweet, which is here, this Q item. I'll split the attributes and add a v-for. And we want to loop through this tweets array. So I'll do v-for tweet in tweets. And we also need a key property. And for now, I'm just going to use the date as a key. Although later on when we set up Firebase, we will add some IDs to our tweets, which we'll also use as the key later on. But for now, I'm just going to set the key to tweet.date and save that. And we now see 2 tweets on the page. So let's hook up the content and the date. So I'm going to select everything inside this Q item label and instead output tweet.content and save that. And I'll do the same for the date, which is here. So double curly braces and tweet.date, and I'll save that. And I want to have a separator between each tweet, so we can use the separator prop on the Q list, which we used over here. So I'll add separator and save that. And this date doesn't look too hot, so let's format this using the date FNS package. So I'm going to search for date FNS. In fact, I'm just going to go straight to date-fns.org. And I'm going to jump to documentation and getting started. And I'll jump down to installation. So we can install this with npm install date-fns. So I'm going to copy that, jump to my terminal and kill the dev process and just run that command. And that's installed. So I'm going to launch the dev process again with Quasar dev, and that's running again. So I'm going to jump back to date-fns. And if we look down at the bottom here, we can use this format distance method to output a date in a relative format, such as 3 days ago, like this. So I'm going to copy this import line and add it to the top of our script section. So I'll paste that here. And we don't need this subdays method, so I'll get rid of that. And let's set up a filter, which will use this method to format the date. So it's going to collapse the data object and add a filters object. And we'll create a filter called relative date. And this is going to expect a value. And we need to return a value. So I'm just going to copy this line from this example. Paste that there. And I'll just stretch this out a sec. So this is going to expect two dates, two parameters. And it's going to return the distance between those two dates in a relative form, such as 3 days ago. So in the second parameter here, we have the current date. And this first parameter, we want to pass in our date. So I'm going to replace all of this with value and save that. And now let's use this filter on our date here. So I want to scroll up to our date, which is here, and then just add a pipe and the name of our filter, relative date, save that. And we can now see some nice relative dates here. After the user types in some text here and clicks on the tweet button, then we want to add the new tweet to our tweets array so that it's displayed here. So I'm going to add a click handler to this tweet button, which is here. So I'll add @click, and we'll trigger a method called add new tweet. I'll jump down to the script section and add a methods object and add this method, add new tweet. And for now, I'll just log out, add new tweet, and make sure that click handler is working. So I'll clear the console, click on the button, and we see that being logged out. So what do we want to do here? Well, we want to set up an object such as this, and we want to set the content to the content that the user entered, and we want to set the date to the current date. And then we just want to push that object to this tweets array. So we'll set up that object first. So we'll call this new tweet, set that equal to an object. We need a content property, which we're going to grab from this new tweet content property, which is hooked up to this input. So we'll set this to this.new tweet content. And then we need a date property with the current date. So we can just fire date.now to get that. And now we just want to push this tweet to our array of tweets. So we can just do this.tweets.push and then pass in this uTweet object. Save that. Let's see if that's working. And it's worked. It's added our tweet to the list and the relative date is working. However, this is right at the bottom and really we want our new tweets to be at the top. So instead of pushing it to the tweets array, we'll unshift it instead. So I'll just change push to unshift, save that and reload. Let's try that again. And yeah, that's working how we want it to now. Let's add the ability to delete a tweet when someone clicks on one of these delete buttons. So I'll add a click handler to this button. So I'll scroll up to these buttons. This is the delete button. So we'll add @click and we'll trigger a method called delete tweet. And we'll just pass in the whole of the tweet object. So I'll pass tweet in here and we'll set up this method. So I'll add that here. So delete tweet, pass in the tweet object. And for now, we'll just log out this tweet object. And I'll just change this string here to delete tweet and save that. And I'll open up the console and click on one of these delete buttons. We can see that log being fired. And we can see the data from the tweet whose delete button was clicked. So now we just want to remove the correct tweet from our tweets array. And I'm just going to do this based on the date for now. Although later on when we set up Firebase, we'll do all this stuff based on IDs instead. But in this delete tweet method, I'm just going to grab the date to delete from this tweet. So I'll put this in a variable called date to delete. So tweet.date. So we want to delete the tweet in the array, which has this date here, which will be in this variable. So we could use the find index method to find the index, the position of the tweet in the array, which has this date. So we can do let index, and then we can do this.tweets.find index, And this is going to loop through each item in our array. So we need a placeholder, and I'll just use queet as the placeholder. Then we want to fire a method with our criteria. And I'm just going to stretch this out a bit. And we just want to see if queet.date is equal to this date here. So equal to date to delete. And that should give us the index of the queet that we want to delete. So I'll just log out the index for now, save that. So I'll click on this first delete button, and yeah, we see index 0. Click on the next one, we see index 1. So now we just want to remove the item in the array at the position of this index. So we can now just do this .queets.splice and pass in the index as the first parameter, and then just pass in 1 as the second parameter so that we only delete one item. And I'll just remove these console logs and save that. And let's see if it's working. I'll just reload, click on delete, and yeah, it seems to be working. And just to make sure it's deleting the right queets, because these are both identical, I'm just going to put some different text in one of these queets. And I have this little Chrome extension called quotes, which will generate a quote. So I'm just going to use that just so I don't have to keep typing loads of queets. And I'll just paste that in here, and I'll just get rid of that single quote and save that. Okay, so I'll try and delete this one. Yeah, it seems to be deleting the correct queet. If you found this video useful so far, make sure you smash the like button and leave a comment telling us what you think about Quasar. Let's add some nice animations for when our queets disappear or appear in our list here. Before we do that, I've just realized that after we add a queet, this input remains populated with whatever we just typed. So I'm just going to quickly fix that. So what we can do in this add new queet method at the end is just set this new queet content property, which is bound to this input, back to an empty string. So we can just do this dot new queet content equals empty string, save that, and I'll just try that again. Yep, the field is now cleared. Okay, back to animations. Quasar has a built-in animation helper, which makes it really easy for us to add animations to our elements and components when they appear or disappear on the page. So I want to jump to the Quasar site, and we want to go to Quasar options and helpers and animations. So we can use any of the animations from animate.css. So I'm just going to click this link and open that. So we have all of these different animations we can use, and I'm just going to use a nice and simple fade in and fade out animation. But feel free to use some of the more fancy animations if you want. And we do need to note these class names here, fade in and fade out, because if we jump back to this animations page on Quasar, we do need to add these animations to our quasar.conf.js file to this animations array like this. So I'm just going to open up the Quasar config file, quasar.conf.js, and I'll search for animations. And I'm just going to add fade in and fade out to this array and save that. And if we scroll down here, it shows us how to use these. So if we want to add an animation to a single component, such as a button, then we can just surround it in a transition element with these props and replace this fade in and fade out with whichever animation that we want to use. But if we want to wrap multiple elements, which we're going to do because we're going to be doing this on a list, which is being spit out with a v-for loop, then we want to use this transition group component instead. So I'm just going to copy the opening tag of this transition group component, jump back to page home.view and find our queets. And this is the queue item here. And I'll just collapse that. So we want to surround this in this transition group component. So I'll paste the opening tag here and indent that. And then I'll add the closing tag at the bottom. And I'll just indent the queue item and save that. And we don't need to change these classes here because I am using the fade in and fade out animations. But if you're using a different animation, then you need to update these. So let's see if that's working. I'll just reload the page. and add a new quit. And yeah, it did have a brief fade in animation there. And if we delete one, we do see it fade out. And I'd like to slow this down a little bit. And so what we can do is just add another class to each of these props here of slow. And you can also use slower as well. Well, that's a bit too slow, so I'm just going to use slow. And this should slow down the animation a little bit. So I'll add a new quit here, and I'm just going to start using this quote generator thing. And yeah, I think that's a little bit nicer. And if we delete it, yeah, it's looking pretty good. And we do have an issue now with our quits. Can you tell what it is? We've lost our separator between each of our tweets. So why has that happened? Well, if we just inspect our queue items here and have a look at what's going on. Here's our queue list, and here's our queue item. And the reason we've lost that separator is because adding this transition group component has added this span around all of our queue items. So if I just temporarily comment out this transition group, both the opening and closing tags, and save that, and we see the separator again, and that span that we saw has disappeared. So if I click on a queue item and take a look at the styles, actually I don't think there's a separator on the first queue item, so I'll look at the second queue item, and we can see the style here, which is adding that border. And the reason we lose the style when we add that transition group, which adds that span, is because this selector is looking for direct children of the containing component. So what I'm going to do is copy this border top property here and put this transition group back in. Then I'm going to add a class to our queue item of quit, and we'll just set up some custom CSS to put the separator back in. So I'll scroll down to the style section, and I'll add that here. So we'll target the quit class, and I'll paste in that style rule and get rid of the semicolon because we don't need that in Sass. Save that, and we can now see the separator again. However, it's also added it to the first quit as well, which is making this line at the bottom of the divider thing look a bit too thick. So what we can do is change this selector here and add a not selector to it so that it ignores the first child. So the first queue item within the queue list. So we can just add colon not, and then parentheses, and then colon first child. And if we save that, we now see the separator disappear from the first child. But we'll still see it on all of the quits which are below the first child. Okay, we're almost done with the front end for this app, but there's a couple of final design tweaks I want to make. And the first one is, I don't like the fact that this column with our relative date is squishing the tweet content over here. And also this column is changing width depending on the text. So if we scroll down to this one with 2 minutes, the column is a lot less wide. And also these icons are sometimes right over here and sometimes over here. So instead I'm going to move this relative date next to the handle, which is how it looks on Twitter anyway. So we just have the name, the handle, a bullet, and then the relative date. And the other thing is, I don't like the fact that when we have a long list of quits and we scroll down, this left drawer disappears like that. I think it would be better if these navigation links stayed up here, which is how it works on the Twitter site. If we scroll down, all of this stuff stays in place. So let's do the same thing on our app. So let's start by moving this relative date next to this handle. So I'm going to jump to our queue item with the quit, and our relative date is here. So I'm going to cut that and get rid of this queue item section and scroll up to our handle, and I'll add a space after that and then a new line. And then I'll add a bullet by using and, bull, and semicolon. And then we'll just spit out the relative date there. So I'll save that, and that's looking a lot better. I'll just add a load of new quits, and yeah, that's looking a lot better now. And let's see if it looks okay on mobile. So this relative date is sometimes being spread across multiple lines. So what I might do is just add a break tag before this relative date that only gets added on mobile. so that this relative date gets pushed down to the next line. So what I'll do is add a break tag here. We only want this break tag to be displayed on devices which are less than medium. So I'm going to add a class of lt-md and save that. And on mobile, we see the relative date is pushed down to a new line. But on desktop, we see it side by side with the name and the handle. Okay, now let's fix this issue of the left drawer scrolling up the page when we scroll down a longer list of tweets. And Quasar has a scroll area component which we can use to make a particular part of our app scrollable. So what we could do is put everything in our home page within a scroll area so that when we scroll down our list of tweets, we're just scrolling down the scroll area that's surrounding everything on the home page. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and view components and scroll area. We see a basic scroll area here. So I'm going to click on view source and I'll just copy the opening tag for this Q scroll area component. And I'll place that at the top of our Q page, just here. I'm just going to collapse everything else for now and put the closing tag at the bottom here and then just indent everything. Save that. And this is working, except this scroll area is currently way too small. And we do need to specify the width and height of these scroll area components in order for them to work. So what we could do is make our page, our Q page component, relatively positioned. Then we could make this scroll area component absolutely positioned and set its width and height to 100% so that it fills up all of the available space on our page. And Quasar has some positioning classes we can use to do this. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and then style and identity and positioning. So we can use this relative-position class to make an element relatively positioned. So let's add that to our Q page. So class relative-position, save that. And then to make this Q scroll area component absolutely positioned, we can use this absolute class. So I'm going to remove this style attribute here and add a class of absolute. And we also want to give this component 100% width and 100% height. And maybe we could use this full screen class for that, which says fixed position covering all window real estate. So I'll add that class as well to the Q scroll area and save that. Let's see how that's looking. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. So now when we scroll down our tweets, we only scroll down this scroll area and everything in our layout is staying fixed in place. Let's just make sure it looks okay on mobile. Yeah, looks okay. Okay, so I think we're done with all of the front end for our app. Let's set up a simple real-time backend for our app using a Firebase Cloud Firestore database. Let's set up a Firebase Cloud Firestore database to store all of our tweet data and give us real-time data sync across all of our devices. And everything we're going to be using here from Firebase is going to be free for reasonable amounts of use. But just bear in mind that if you create an app with a Firebase database and millions of people download it, then you will be expected to start paying. So you might want to check out the pricing page at firebase.google.com/pricing, where you can see all of the limits that are available on the free plan. And then you just want to go to firebase.google.com and click on Go to Console. And if you've not already signed up, it'll probably ask you to sign up and sign in with your Google account. But I'm just going to click on Go to Console. And then I'm just going to click on Add Project. And we need to enter a name, and I'll call it Quitter. Click on Continue. And I'm going to disable Google Analytics and click on Create Project. It's finished creating the project, so I'm going to click on Continue. And we're going to be creating a Cloud Firestore database. So I'm going to click on Cloud Firestore on the left here, click on Create Database, and I'm going to click on Start in Test Mode, just to make it easy for us to start working with our database. But just bear in mind that anybody with your database reference will be able to view, edit, and delete data in your database when you have it set to test mode. And I'll click on next. And then it asks us to choose a location. I'm not sure what difference this makes, but I'm just going to click on enable. Okay, it's created our database and we can see it here, and it's empty right now. And Cloud Firestore databases are made up of collections, and collections contain documents, and each document is basically just a JavaScript style object. So let's start a collection for our tweets. So I'm going to click on Start Collection, and I'm going to call this Tweets. Click on Next, and it's asking us to add our first document, and each document needs to have an ID. So I'm just going to click on Auto ID so that Firebase will generate an ID for us. And let's add a tweet here, and our tweets have a content field and a date field. So let's add a content field, and I'm just going to use that quotes extension to paste in a quote here. And then I'm going to click on add field and add a date field, and this is going to be a number. And I'm just going to use date.now in the console to generate a date for us. So date.now. Then I'm going to copy this, paste that in here, and click on save. So we can see our tweets collection here, and all of our documents will be displayed here. And this is the document ID here. And if we click on that, we can see all of the fields in that document. So let's add a few more. I'm going to click on add document, click on auto ID, and add a content field. And again, I'm just going to use this little extension. Click on add field, and we'll set a date, set it to type number. And again, I'll just use the console to generate a timestamp. Copy that, paste it in here, click save. And we'll add another document, auto ID, content, and I'll paste in some content. Add a date field, set it to number, and again, grab the current date with date.now. And actually for this one, I'm going to set this date to an hour ago so we can make sure our ordering and stuff like that is working. And there are 3,600,000 milliseconds in an hour. So I'm just going to copy this and do that timestamp minus 3,600,000. And I'll copy this timestamp and add it here. And I'll just add one more document. Add the date. And grab the current timestamp, date.now. Paste that in there, click save. Okay, so we now have a decent amount of data in our database, but to get access to our database, we need to set up an app. So I'm just going to stretch this out and open up this sidebar. We want to go to Project Overview, and here's where we can add an app, and we want to add a web app. So I'm going to click on this web icon, give it a name. I'm just going to give it the same name, Quitter, and click on Register App. And it tells us how to initialize our database with some script tags. But I'm not going to do it this way because the correct way to initialize a package like this in Quasar is to import the modules we need and use a boot file. So I'm going to leave this open though because we're going to need this config object later on. But I'm just going to click on this Get Started link down here and open that in a new tab. And it tells us how to get started here. I'm going to scroll down. So we've already created a Firebase project and we've already registered our app with Firebase. So step 3, add Firebase SDKs and initialize Firebase. We want to click on using module bundlers here. And so first of all, we need to install Firebase to our project. So I'm going to copy this and jump to our terminal, kill the dev process and run that command to install Firebase. Okay, that's finished installing. We jump back to this Firebase page. It tells us how to initialize Firebase with these two code samples here. And we're going to add these to a boot file. And again, a boot file allows us to run code before our app starts. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and Quasar CLI and boot files, and I'll jump down to when to use boot files. So boot files fulfill one special purpose. They run code before the app's Vue root component is instantiated while giving you access to certain variables, which is required if you need to initialize a library, interfere with Vue router, inject Vue prototype, or inject the root instance of the Vue app. And we don't need to do anything with Vue router or the Vue prototype or anything, but we do want to initialize our connection to Firebase before our app starts so that we have immediate access to our database when our app is ready. And if we scroll down to usage of boot files, it shows us how to generate a boot file. We can just run Quasar new boot and then the name. So I'm going to jump back to the terminal and run Quasar new boot, and we'll call this Firebase. And it says it's generated a boot file in the source boot folder, and we can see it there. And it also says make sure to reference it in quasar.conf.js and the boot section. So I'm going to open up quasar.conf.js and search for boot. And we just need to add Firebase to this array here and save that. And now let's open up this firebase.js boot file. And in a boot file, we can access the app, the router, and the Vue prototype, but we're not going to need any of that stuff here. So I'm just going to delete all of this, and I'm going to jump back to that Firebase page and copy this first example here and paste that in here. And I'll get rid of all of these comments. And we only need to import the modules that we need. And we do need Firebase from firebase/app, but we don't need analytics. So I'll get rid of this line, and we don't need auth. We're not going to be doing any authentication, but we do need Firestore. So I'll leave that there. And I'll just get rid of these semicolons because I've not been generally using them. And I'll jump back to this Firebase page, and it tells us how to initialize Firebase in our app after we've imported all the modules we need. So I'll copy this example and paste it into our boot file, and I'll get rid of these comments. And that config object that we saw before, we need to put that in here. So I'm going to jump back to this other page, which was displayed after we created the web app. And I'm going to copy everything inside this config object and just paste that in here. And there's one more thing we need to do. If we jump back to that Firebase page and scroll down to step 5, and if we jump to Cloud Firestore, which is what we're going to be using, and scroll down to initialize Cloud Firestore. So we just need to fire this firebase.firestore method and assign it to a variable. So I'll just copy this line and paste that to the bottom, and I'll change var to let and get rid of these semicolons. And this DB variable will give us access to our Firestore database. So we want to export that so that we can use it anywhere within our app. So I'm just going to add export default and then DB and save that. And this boot file should be ready to go now. And we should now have access to our Firestore database with this DB variable. So I'm just going to launch our app with Quasar Dev, make sure we don't have any errors. And it's launched our app and we don't have any errors. So let's grab the queets that we created in our database and display them in our app. Let's grab our queets from our queets collection in our database and display them within our app. So I'm going to jump to the Firebase docs page, and over on the left here under Cloud Firestore, I'm going to go to read data, and I'm going to jump to listen for real-time updates. And I'm going to scroll down to view changes between snapshots. And this code sample here will allow us to add real-time data sync to our app across our devices, because this on snapshot here is a hook. And this hook will be fired every time the data in the collection that we specify here changes. And we can determine exactly what happened, whether a document was added or modified or removed. And then we can fire code to update our view accordingly. So let's say we're using our app and somebody else, say Jim, is also using our app and they add a new queet. Well, this on snapshot hook will be fired on our device, and we can determine that a queet was added, and we can then add that queet that was added by Jim to our view. And likewise, if Jim modifies or removes a queet, this hook will be fired and we can update our view on our device accordingly. So it's using hooks like this in Firebase which makes real-time data sync across devices possible. So I'm going to copy this example and I'm going to jump back to our code. And first we need to get access to this DB variable in our home page. So I'm going to jump to page home.view, and then at the top of the script section, I'm going to import DB from, and then the path to our boot file, which is source/boot/Firebase. And we don't need to put in the .js. And then we want to trigger this hook that we just copied. And we could do this in a mounted hook. Just going to collapse the data and the methods and the filters. We'll add a mounted hook at the bottom here. Before we paste in this hook, I'm just going to clear out the hard-coded queets that we added. So I'll just comment out these queets here and save that so that we know that any queets that appear here are coming from our database. And I'm going to jump back down to this mounted hook and paste in this code sample. And I'm just going to fix the indentation a bit. So this is going to access our database, and it's going to grab the collection that we specify here. And our collection is called queets. So we want to put queets in here. I'm just going to change these double quotes into single quotes. And this .where method is going to filter our results by some criteria. And we don't need to do that. We just want to grab all of our queets. So I'll get rid of this where method. I'm just going to move this on snapshot up to this line and nudge everything back. So we're going to grab our queets collection. And then every time that queets collection changes, this on snapshot method will be fired, which will return a snapshot of all of our data. And then we can get an array of all of our changes by firing this .changes method on the snapshot. And then we're basically just looping through each of those changes. And each of those changes will be an object which will have a type property, which will tell us the type of change. So whether a document was added, modified, or removed. We can also get access to the data which was added, modified, or removed. So I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to select all these double quotes and replace them with single quotes because that's generally what I've been using. And I'm going to get rid of any semicolons because I've not been using them. I'm going to update the text in these console logs. So instead of new city, I'm going to put new queet and modified queet and removed queet. So let's save this and see what gets logged out. So I'll reload the page and open up the console. And we can see new queet being logged out 4 times for each of our queets because we have 4 in our database. Because this if statement here will be fired in real time whenever a document is added to our database, but it will also be fired once for each document in our database when we first connect to the database, which is why we're seeing these logs here. And we have the data for each of our queets. So what we can do here in this if statement is just push the data object for each of our queets to our queets array in our data. And so our data is in here in change.doc.data. So instead of firing this out 3 times like that, I'm going to put that in a variable at the top of this for each. So I'll set up a variable called queet change, set that equal to this change.doc.data, and I'll replace all of these with this variable, so queet change. And so what we can do now in this added if statement is just add this queet change object to our queets array, and we should then see each of the queets appear on the page. So what we can do here is this .queets.unshift and pass in queet change. Let's save that and see if it's working. I'll just reload that. It doesn't seem to be working. Cannot read property queets of undefined. And that's because these functions here are normal JavaScript functions. So when we use the this keyword, it will refer to this function here instead of our view instance. So we can just change these functions to arrow functions. So I'm just going to get rid of function and the first parentheses and get rid of this parentheses and just add an arrow there. And I'll do the same on this function as well. Let's save that and try it again. We can now see our tweets on the page. However, these tweets are not in the correct order because this one at the top here is from 2 hours ago and these other ones are from 1 hour ago. So we want to order these by date. And if we jump back to the Firebase page and jump to order and limit data, we can use this order by method to order our data by a particular field. So after db.collection tweets, I'm going to add .orderBy. We can just pass in date. I'll save that. And our tweets are now in the correct order. We see the oldest one down at the bottom. And this if statement here will now be fired whenever a tweet is added to our collection in the database. And so just to demonstrate that, I'm going to jump to the database and drag it over here. And just drag this over a little bit. And I'll add a new tweet here. I'll use auto ID, add the content field. I'll just grab a quote from that extension, paste that in there, add the date field, set that to a number, and I'm just going to use date.now to grab the current date and paste that in here. And hopefully when I click save, we should see this new tweet appear in our list of tweets at the top there. So I'll click on save and we see that new tweet appear. Let's add the ability to add a tweet to our database, to our tweets collection, when the user clicks this button. Because right now it's just adding the tweet to our local tweets array. And so we do see it here, but if we refresh the page, then that data is gone. So I'm going to jump to the add new tweet method, which is fired when we click this button. And that's here. So we still want to set up a new tweet object like this. And we still want to clear out this new tweet content property, which clears out this input. But we no longer want to add this new tweet object directly to our local tweets array here. What we want to do instead is add this new tweet object straight to our Firebase database, to our tweets collection, because when we do that, this onSnapshot hook will be fired because we made a change to our collection, and change.type will be equal to added. So this if statement will fire, and at that point the new tweet will be added to our local tweets array and then displayed on the page. So I'll jump back up to this add new tweet method and I'll comment out this line. And what we want to do at this point is add this new tweet object straight to our tweets collection in the database. So I'm going to jump back to the Firebase docs page and I'm going to go to add and manage data and add data. And I'm going to scroll down to add a document. And there are two ways we can add a document to a collection. We can use this set method, but if we use that method, then we need to specify the ID where that document should be stored. But if we want to add a document and let Firebase generate the ID for us, then we can use this add method. So I'm just going to copy this code sample here and we'll paste it here in our add new tweet method. And I'll just fix the indentation. And I'm going to replace all the double quotes with single quotes. And I'm going to remove the semicolons. We want to access the tweets collection. So I'll change this here to tweets. And the data that we want to add is just this new tweet object. So we can just select this object in here and just paste in new tweet. And I'm just going to format this a little bit. I'm going to move the then block up here. Then I'm going to move this catch block up here. Okay, so let's save that and see if it's working. So I'll add a new tweet. Click the button. Yeah, we see it appear on the page. And let's just make sure it's been added to the database. And yeah, we can see it there. Let's make sure we can still see it if we reload. And yeah, we do. Let's add the ability to delete a tweet from our tweets collection in our database. And before we handle actually removing a tweet from the database when this delete button is clicked, let's handle removing a tweet from our local tweets array in this onSnapshot hook, in this if statement here. And we want to make all of our local state changes or all of our local data changes inside this hook. The reason being, again, just to remind you, this onSnapshot hook will be fired every time the database changes. So even if somebody on a completely different device adds, modifies, or deletes a tweet, this on snapshot hook will be fired on our device. And so we can add, modify, or remove the appropriate tweet from our local state and update our view accordingly. So it's making local state changes in this hook and only in this hook, which makes live data sync across devices possible. And so if a tweet is removed from our database, then this if statement should be fired, and we should see this console log being fired out. So let's manually remove a tweet from our database and see what we see. So I'm going to drag the database over here and open up the console in our app. Just clear the console. Let's delete one of these tweets. So we can just click on these buttons here and click on delete document and click on start delete. We can see that log being fired out. We can see the data for that tweet. We can see the content property and the date property. So now what we want to do at this point here is remove the same tweet from our local tweets array, thus removing it from the view. And we could remove it from our local tweets array based on the date property. However, there's always the chance that multiple tweets could have the same date. So it would be better if we could delete the tweet based on these IDs, which have been generated by Firebase instead, because these IDs will always be unique. But we don't currently have access to these IDs right now. We only have access to the content property and the date property. However, if we jump back to our onSnapshot hook, then we can actually get access to the ID at change.doc.id, like this, change.doc.id. So let's add this ID to our tweet change object here, which currently just contains the content and date properties. So what we can do is add a new property to this tweet change object, an ID property, and set it to this ID. So we can just do tweet change.id equals change.doc.id. So I'll save that. And hopefully now when a tweet is removed from the database, we should see the ID in this tweet change object as well. So let's delete a document from our tweets collection and see if we can see the ID being logged out. So I'll click on this and click on delete document and start delete. And we can see the tweet object being logged out. And we can now see the ID as well in this new ID property. And we should see the IDs in our local tweets array as well. So if I go to View DevTools and try and find this page, Queue Page Container and Page Home, we can see our tweets array here. We do have the IDs. And currently, if I jump back to Page Home.view and our list of tweets, we're still using the date property as the key. And it would be better to use these IDs instead because we know they're always going to be unique. So I'm just going to change the key to tweet.id instead and save that. Okay, so now that we have the ID of the tweet that was deleted, we can use that ID to remove the same tweet from our local tweets array. So I'm going to jump back down to our onSnapshot hook and this if statement here. Let's start by finding the index of the same tweet in our local array. So I'll add let index, and then we can do this .tweets .find index, pass in a placeholder and a callback, and we want to find the index of the tweet where the tweet.id is equal to the ID in this tweet change object. So I'll just put tweet change.id. So that should give us the index, and we can then just use the splice method to remove the tweet at this position from the array. So we can just do this .tweets.splice, pass in the index and pass in 1 so that we only remove one item. Let's save that and see if it's working. I'll just reload the page and then clear the console and open up the Firebase console. Let's delete a tweet. So we'll delete this top one here. So I'll delete that and hopefully we should see it disappear from the view. And now we also want to delete a tweet from our database when this delete button is clicked as well, because right now it's just deleting a tweet from our local tweets array, but not from the database. So let's jump to our delete tweet method, which is here. And I'm just going to remove everything inside this method. Let's find out on the Firebase docs page how we can delete a document from our collection. So over on the left here, I'm going to jump to add and manage data and then delete data. And so to delete a document, we just need to specify the collection as usual and specify the document that we want to delete. So we pass the document ID into here, and then we just fire this delete method. So let's copy this example and paste it into this delete tweet method. I'm just going to fix the indentation, remove the semicolons, and replace the double quotes with single quotes. And so we want to access the tweets collection, and we need to pass the document ID that we want to delete in here. And we're passing in the tweet object of the tweet that was clicked in here. And so we have access to the ID of the tweet that was clicked at tweet.id. So we can just pass tweet.id in here. And so hopefully this should work now. So I'll save that and reload, clear the console, and I'll click on this delete button. Yeah, it looks like it worked. We saw it removed from the view, and we see document successfully deleted, which is coming from the then block on this delete method. Let's make sure it was removed from the database. And yeah, we only have one document in the database now. Okay, so we've almost finished our app now. There's just one more thing that I want to do. So we can create, read, and delete our tweets, but we can't currently update them. So let's complete our CRUD setup by adding the ability to update a tweet. One thing we could do is add the ability to like a tweet when this heart button is clicked here. So first, let's just set up the front end for this, because if a tweet is liked, then we probably want this heart icon to be filled and maybe give it a color as well. So I'm going to delete all of the tweets that are on Firebase. I'm just going to drag this back over here. We only have one document left. And I'm going to delete this tweet because we're going to need to add a new field to our tweets. So I'm going to delete this and jump back to our app. And I'm going to uncomment these hard-coded tweets that we added before. And I'm going to add a new property to each of these called liked. And I'll set one of these to false and then the other one to true. And we're also going to need to add some ID properties now, because our v-for loop is now using an ID property as the key. So let's just add some dummy IDs here. So I'll just set these to ID1 and ID2. And I'll save that. And so this tweet here is the one that's liked, the one where liked is set to true. So we want this heart icon to look a bit different. I would like it to be a filled icon if possible and a different color as well. So we got this icon from Font Awesome. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site and then the icon page. And then I'll jump through to Font Awesome. Search for heart and scroll down. So this is the one we're currently using, but when a tweet is liked, we could use this filled version. So I'll click on that and I'll copy this example here. Let's jump up to this heart icon, which is here. And for now, I'm just going to paste out this HTML that we copied down here. So if the liked property is set to true, then we want to set this icon prop to these classes here. Otherwise, we want to set them to these classes. So what we could do here is bind to the icon prop and add a ternary if statement here. So if tweet.liked is true, then we can spit out these classes. So I'll paste that in these quotes here. Otherwise, stretch this out a bit, we can spit out these classes here. And I'll just get rid of this icon prop and get rid of this I tag as well. Let's save that and see if it's working. Yeah, this second one has a filled heart and the other one still has the outline heart. And I'd also like to change the color as well. So what we could do is bind to this color prop. So color. And again, if tweet.liked is true, then we could try outputting pink as the color. Otherwise, we'll just output gray. And I'll get rid of this color prop and save that. And yeah, it seems to be working. We now have this lovely pink heart. Okay, so our front end is now ready to display tweets which are liked. So let's comment out these hard-coded queets in this queets array and save that. And when we add a new queet now, we're going to have to make sure that the queet object that we push to the database has this new liked property. So I'm going to jump to add new queet, this method. And when we set up the new queet object here, we also need to add this liked property, and that should be set to false by default. So I'll save that and reload. Let's just add some queets here and make sure that the queets in the database have this new liked property. So I'm just going to use this quotes extension to add a load of quotes. Let's jump to the database. You can see our new documents here. And yeah, they all have this liked field. So let's change one of them to true and update that and reload the page. And yeah, we can see this one has our pink and filled heart. So before we handle the click event on this button, let's just make sure our view gets updated when this onSnapshot hook is fired, when a queet has been modified. So let's first of all grab the index of the queet that was modified in our local queets array. So I'm just going to copy this line here from the removed if statement and paste that here. So this will give us the index of the queet that was modified, and the modified data will be in this queet change object. So what we could do is use object assign to copy the data from this object, which has come from the database, to the queet object in our local queets array at the position of index, thus updating the appropriate queet in the view. So what we can do here is object.assign, and first we want to pass in the object that we want to assign to, which is the object in our local queets array at the position of index. So we can just do this .queets square brackets index, and the second parameter we pass in the data that we want to copy here. So we can just pass in queet change, and I'll save that and reload the page. And if we jump to the database, let's drag it over here. And this document where liked is set to true, this one here, let's change this back to false, and we should hopefully see this heart change back to the deactivated version. So I'll set this to false and click update. Yeah, it seems to be working. I'll just change it back to true again. And yeah, that all seems to be working. So I'll set this back to false. Okay, so now all we need to do is handle the click on this heart icon. So when the user clicks this button, then we want to update the appropriate queet in our queets collection on Firebase. So I'm going to jump to this heart button, which is here, and add a click handler. So at click, and this is going to be a toggle because we're going to be able to toggle between liked and not liked. So we'll trigger a method called toggle liked, and we'll pass in our queet object so that we have access to the ID in this method, because we're going to need that to update the appropriate queet on Firebase. We'll create this method in our methods object. So toggle queet, pass in the queet. And for now, let's just log out toggled. Actually, I've spelled that wrong. That should be toggle queet. So we'll just log out toggle queet here. We'll log out the queet as well. So I'll save that, reload, and click on one of these heart buttons. Toggled liked is not a function. Let me just jump back to that click handler. This should be toggle liked. So I'll save that. I'm still seeing an error here. Why is that? Oh, this should be toggle liked, not toggle queet. So I'll just update that. Okay, save that. Let's reload. Click on one of these like buttons. Yeah, we can see toggle liked. We can see the queet that was clicked. We have the ID there. So we can use that to update the appropriate queet in our queets collection on Firebase. So I'm going to jump back to the Firebase docs. And I'm going to jump to add data and update a document. So again, we just do db.collection and the name of the collection. Then we fire the doc method and pass in the ID of the document we want to update. Then we just fire this update method and pass in an object with the new data. So I'm just going to copy all of this and paste it into this toggle liked method. And instead of having this ref in a variable, I'm just going to copy this ref and paste it here. Get rid of this comment and get rid of that var. I'm just going to fix the indentation, get rid of these semicolons, and replace the double quotes. So we want to do db.collection, and we want to pass queets in here, and then we want to pass the ID of the document that we want to update in here, and that's going to be at queet.id. So we can just put queet.id in here. What do we want to update? We want to update the liked property, and we want to set it to the opposite of this queet's current liked property. So if that's currently false, we want to set it to true. And if it's currently true, we want to set it to false. So we can just set liked to the opposite of queet.liked. Okay, so let's save that and see if it's working. I'm going to reload the page. Right now, none of our queets are liked. Let's click on a like button, and it seems to have worked. We see it change in the view, and we see document successfully updated, which means this then block is being fired. And let's make sure it worked on Firebase. So it was this queet here, and yeah, liked is set to true. Let's make sure we can toggle it back again. Yeah, we saw that change on Firebase there. Okay, we're almost ready to start deploying this app to different platforms. We just have a couple of tiny little issues that we need to fix. Okay, we just have a couple of final issues to fix. And the first one is when we're looking at this in the mobile view, when we click on this button, our left drawer is all messed up. And this is being caused by this full screen class, which we added to this QScroll area, which is surrounding everything that's on our home page. Because if we inspect this element and look for this scroll area, which is here, and we look at this full screen class, it's adding a Z index of 6000, which is placing this QScroll area above the left drawer. However, there's some other classes that we can use instead of this full screen class. If you go to this other CSS helper classes page on the Quasar site, we can use this full height class and this full width class instead to make the QScroll area full width and full height without adding that Z index. So I'm just going to replace this full screen class on the QScroll area with full width and full height and save that. Let's reload the app, and that's now fixed. Let's just make sure this QScroll area is still okay if we have a load of tweets. So I'll just add a load of new tweets, and it still looks okay. And it looks okay on desktop as well. And the other issue we need to fix is to do with our onSnapshot hook. This hook is currently being initialized every time we hit the home page. So if I reload the page, we see all these new tweet logs from Firebase. But if we clear the console and jump to the About page and jump back to the home page, we see them all being logged out again. And also, if I clear the console and click on a like button, you can see this modified tweet log being logged out twice. And that's because we visited this homepage twice. So this hook has been set up 2 times. And we only want to set this hook up once and never again after that. And we can fix this quite easily by just making the pages of our app keep alive in the background, so that when we navigate from page to page, the page that we just left keeps alive, keeps running, but we just don't see it. And to do this, we want to go to main-layout.view and this QPage container component, and this router view component here is where our pages are rendered. And if we want to make this router view keep alive, thus making our pages keep alive, then we can just surround this in keep alive tags like this. So I'll save that and I'll reload the app. So we see all of our new tweet logs. And if I jump to the About page, I'll just clear the console and then back to the home page. Then we don't see those logs again. And if I click on a like button, we only see 1 log from our onSnapshot hook. So let's just make sure everything is working in both desktop view and mobile view. So we'll do desktop first. So I'll reload the app. And we can navigate our pages. And we can toggle the left drawer, and our tweet button is disabled when there's no text in here. Let's just make sure the character limit is working. Yeah, that's working. We can add a tweet, We can like a tweet. We can delete a tweet. If we reload, the tweet that we just deleted has been removed. And let's just check everything in mobile view. I'm going to use the device toolbar and set this to iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus. So I'll reload the app. Okay, so we can toggle the left drawer and we can navigate our pages. Let's make sure the character count is working. Yeah, that's working. We can add a tweet. We can like a tweet. We can delete a tweet as well. Okay, so Twitter is now complete and it's working great in the browser in both desktop layouts and mobile layouts. So it's finally time to create some real apps out of this sucker for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows. Let's get Twitter running as a Mac app. And you do need to have a Mac in order to do this. And if you're on a Mac, this is super simple. You just need to jump to your terminal. And I'm going to open up a new terminal because I want to keep the web version running. And then we just need to run Quasar dev-m for mode Electron, because Quasar desktop apps use the Electron framework. And I'll just fire that. And we can now see Twitter running as a Mac app. And by the way, if you're on Windows and you run the command that we just ran, you should see the Windows version of the app launching in development mode. And if we go to View and toggle Developer Tools, we can even open up some developer tools for the Mac version of our app. One thing that's really great is that we now even have Vue DevTools integrated. This wasn't here the last time I checked, so this is pretty badass. We're seeing the mobile layout by default because this window is a little bit small by default, although we can resize it up. But what we can do to fix that is set a width for this browser window and set a minimum width as well. So I'm going to jump to the code, and if we look in our project, we can see Quasar has generated a new folder, source Electron. And if we go to main process and electron-main, we can use this file to customize all of the stuff that happens in the main process. So the native app side of the process. We can do all sorts of stuff here. So we can customize these menus at the top, add our own menus and options, and trigger code when those options are clicked on. We can set up a menu bar icon for our app up here. We can interact with the user's file system and all sorts of stuff. But for now, I'm just going to give this browser window a width and a minimum width as well. So I'm going to scroll down this file, and here's where it's initializing our browser window. And you can see these width and height properties here. And if you want to see all of the available options, then just Google Electron browser window and jump to this page. And you can find all of the different options here. So there's tons of stuff we can do. We do have a min width property and a min height property. So I'm just going to set this width property to 1024, which I think is the starting width of our desktop layout. And I'll also add a min width property and set it to the same 1024. And if I save that, it will relaunch our app. And it's made our window a little bit bigger, and we now see the desktop layout. And we can resize it up, but we can't resize it any smaller than 1024. Okay, so let's make sure everything is working. So we can get to our two pages. We can toggle the left drawer. We can display all of our tweets and scroll down them. Let's see if the character limit and counter are working. And yeah, they're working. We can add a new tweet. We can like a tweet, and we can delete a tweet as well. And I'll just demonstrate the live data sync across devices. When I launched the Mac version, it did kill my browser version. So I just had to jump back to the terminal with the browser version running and kill the process and run Quasar dev again. But if I just get the Electron version on the left and the browser on the right, and if I add a new tweet here, hey, what's going on? And click on tweet, we see the same tweet pop up instantly on the Mac version. And likewise, if I like a tweet on the Mac version, we see it update instantly on the web version. And if I delete a tweet on the Mac version, we see it deleted instantly on the browser version. So we now know for sure that all of our cross-device live data sync is working. Let's get this running as a Windows app. And if you're on Windows, then you can just run the command that I ran before, Quasar dev-m Electron. But I'm on a Mac here, so I'm going to build the Windows version for production, and then I'm going to launch it in a Windows 10 virtual machine. And to get Quasar to build the Windows version, we need to make a change to our config file. So I'm going to open up quasar.conf.js, and I'm going to search for Electron. And in this packager option here, we need to add an option of platform, and we need to set that to Win32 and save that. And now we just need to go to the terminal, and instead of running Quasar dev-m Electron, we run Quasar build-m Electron. So I'll fire that. Okay, it says build succeeded. And by the way, if it doesn't succeed, then you might be able to fix this by just deleting your node modules folder and running npm install and then running the build command again. And it says it's output it to the dist/electron folder. And we can see that dist folder here and this electron folder, and our Windows app is in here. Stretch this out a bit, and we can see our exe file here. And I'm going to launch this exe in a Windows 10 virtual machine. I'm going to use VirtualBox to do this. And there is a little bit of setup involved here. You need to download VirtualBox from virtualbox.org. So you need to download and install that. And then you need to download a Windows 10 virtual machine. So if you just Google Windows 10 VirtualBox and jump to this page on the Microsoft site, then you can download a Windows 10 virtual machine for VirtualBox here. And once that's downloaded and unzipped, you should see a couple of files like this, a VMDK file and an OVF file. And if there's a third file with the file extension MF, then you want to delete that file because it can stop you from importing the virtual machine properly. And then you just want to double click this OVF file and it should add the virtual machine to VirtualBox. And you also want to go to settings and then shared folders. And you want to share the folder on your Mac where you keep all your projects by clicking on this button here so that you can get access to the generated exe file. And then you can just launch your virtual machine by double clicking on it. Okay, it's launched my virtual machine. So I'm going to go to Windows Explorer. Then I'm going to go to Network. And we see this VBox server computer. If we go in there, I can see the folder that's on my Mac that I've shared with this virtual machine. So I'm going to go in there and jump down to the quitter folder, dist, and Electron. And I'm going to copy this folder with our app and paste it on the desktop. And then I'm going to jump into that folder. And we can see the exe file there. And I'm going to launch that. And we now see Quitter running as a Windows app. And this is going to be a little bit slow because we're in a virtual machine here. But on a real Windows device, the performance would be much better. And let's just see if it's obeying our minimum width, which we set in the process file, and it is. I can't resize it down any more than that. Let's make sure everything is working. So we can get to both of our pages. We can toggle our sidebar. And we don't have a line along the top here. However, Quasar has some classes which get added to the body that you can use to target particular platforms. So what you could do is add a border to the top of the app, but only on Windows, just to make this look a little bit better. So we can display our tweets and we can scroll down them. Let's see if we can add one. Let's check the character counter as well. And yeah, that seems to be working. I'll click on tweet and it's added our tweet. We can like a tweet and we can delete a tweet as well. Let's create an iOS version of Quitter, and you do need to have a Mac to do this. Although, as a side note, a couple of my students have told me that they managed to create iOS and Mac apps using a Windows computer, and I believe they used VMware, and it's not something that I've tried, so I can't confirm if it's possible, but it might be worth investigating if you are on Windows and you're interested in creating iOS and Mac apps. But generally speaking, you need a Mac, and you also need to have Xcode installed and you can download this from the Mac App Store, although I recommend downloading it from the Apple developer site at developer.apple.com/download/more. And you also need to have Cordova installed globally because Quasar mobile apps use the Cordova framework. And if you go to the Quasar site and Quasar CLI and developing Cordova apps and preparation, shows you how to install Cordova there. So you just need to fire this command. And if you have trouble installing that, you might need to add sudo to the start. Once that's all set up, we can then launch our app in the iOS simulator. So we just need to jump to our terminal and run Quasar dev-m for mode, Cordova -T and iOS. And it's asking for a Cordova app ID here. And this ID will be used by the app stores if you decide to deploy your app to the app stores. So you need to be 100% sure that this ID is unique. And one way that you can make sure it's unique is by using a reverse domain style ID, such as com.dannyconnell.twitter. It's pretty unlikely that somebody else would have used this ID. And it started up the iOS simulator, and it's launched our app as an iOS app. And shortly after it started up, we can see the elements from our app, but then they disappear. And this might be because we're using the UI web view to basically display our app within this native app that's been created by Quasar. And it's highly recommended that you install the WK Web View plugin because the older UI web view is now deprecated, and Apple will soon begin rejecting apps which use the older web view. And if you go to the Quasar site and search for WK Web View and jump to switching to iOS WK Web View, it tells us how to install this. So hopefully installing this will fix this issue. Although weirdly, if we go to the About page and back to the Home page, then it works again. But anyway, I'm just going to install this plugin. So I'm going to copy this command, jump to the terminal, and we need to cd into this source Cordova folder that it's created. So cd source Cordova, and I'll run that command I just copied, and that's installed. And we also need to add this preference to the iOS section of the Cordova config file, and that's just in the root of this source Cordova file, and that's here, config.xml. So I'm going to scroll down to this platform iOS section, and I'm going to copy this preference tag here and paste that here, and I'll save that, and I'll cd back up to our project folder and try running the dev command again. So Quasar dev-m Cordova-t iOS, and while we're waiting, I'm just going to delete the app that it's already installed just to avoid any caching issues. And we'll just wait for this app to start up. So I've not been able to figure out what's going on here, but I have just noticed that this simulator is running a really old version of iOS 12.2, and the current version is 14 something. So let's try and launch this app on iOS 14 and see if it works. So I'm just going to close this simulator and kill this process. And to get a list of the available simulators, we can cd into the source Cordova folder and run Cordova run iOS -- list, and it will give us a list of all of the available simulators. So let's try the iPhone 12 on iOS 14.3. So what we can do here is copy this device name and jump back up to our project folder, and we can run the same command again, Quasar dev-m Cordova-T iOS. But then we add an extra flag -e for emulator, and then in quotes we can just paste this device name that we just copied. Let's give that a try. And this time it started up the iPhone 12 on iOS 14.3. So fingers crossed it'll work on this simulator. And great, it seems to have started up no problem on the iOS 14 simulator. And just to confirm that, I'm just going to close the app and launch it again. And yeah, it's starting up okay. And let's make sure everything is working. So the left drawer is working. And we can get to our pages. We can see all of our tweets and we can scroll down them, no problem. And let's just make sure this input is working. And yeah, it's counting the characters. And just to check the character limit, I'm just going to copy the text from one of these other tweets and paste that in here. And paste it again. And just type a few more characters. And yeah, it's stopping us at 280 characters. And let's see if we can actually add the tweet. Yeah, it seems to have added it, no problem. And we can like tweets. And we can delete them as well. Okay, finally, let's create an Android version of our app. And there's a little bit more setup involved for Android. But if you go back to this preparation for Cordova app page on the Quasar site, which you can find at Quasar CLI, developing Cordova apps and preparation, it tells you everything you need to do here. So after installing Cordova, you need to download Android Studio and follow some installation steps. And then after that's installed, you need to use this SDK Manager tool, which comes with the Android SDK, and use that to accept some licenses. And then you need to add the Android installation to your path. And it gives you some instructions on how to do this on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And on Windows, you also need to install some other software as well. But just read through all these steps and follow them very carefully. But I'm just going to launch Android Studio. Then I'm going to click on this Configure button and go to the AVD Manager, Android Virtual Device Manager. And I have an Android virtual device set up here, a Pixel 2 XL. So I'm going to click on this play button to launch this emulator. And now that the emulator has fully started up, we can now launch our app on it. So we just need to go to our terminal, and instead of running Quasar dev-m Cordova-t iOS, we want to run the same command, but with Android after the capital T flag. And we now have an Android version of our app, and it seems to have launched okay. Let's make sure it's working. So we can get to our different pages. You can see all of our tweets, and we can scroll down them. Let's see if we can add a tweet. Click the button, and yeah, it's added it. Let's see if we can like them. Yep, seems to work. And delete. Yep, seems to be working as well. So we created an app with a beautiful front end, a nice simple back end, and live data sync across all the different devices. And we deployed it to all these different platforms, all thanks to the amazing Quasar Framework, as well as Vue.js and Firebase. And there's a lot more that you would probably want to add to this app, such as adding a custom icon and splash screen, and customizing the menus for the Electron app, handling errors and adding loading screens, adding a settings page, setting up some kind of state management for the app using something like Vuex, and breaking up your app into child components to make it more manageable. And you can learn about many of these things and more at my YouTube channel. So please check it out at dannys.link/YouTube, and the link will be in the description. And huge thanks to freeCodeCamp for hosting this video, and thanks to you for watching.